It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. How far would Britain go to protect Ukraine? The Prime Minister visited the embattled country. Gives his clearest answer yet.
Would you be prepared to deploy troops for peacekeeping? Would you agree to do that in principle?
I've been discussing this with a number of allies, including, of course, President Macron, including President Zelensky here today, and we will play our full part.
During his visit, a drone is shot down over the presidential palace, a warning of the security risk of Russia's continuing war.
Also on Sky News at 10, live from Doha, digging in their heels over the ceasefire deal, the opposition inside Israel and the minister threatening to quit tonight. In Gaza, civil defense officials say more than 70 have been killed since the deal was revealed, including people celebrating its arrival.
They're trying to shut us up and act like they're doing something, when in reality, they're not doing very much.
The victims of grooming gangs hitting out at the government after it announces support for more local inquiries, but no national investigation. The condemnation of so-called corridor care in the NHS, as we speak to nurses who say it's now a year-round problem. The latest launch of Elon Musk's Starship rocket due to take place later this hour, part of which will return to the launch pad in Texas. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview. Good evening. Keir Starmer gave his clearest indication tonight that British troops could join a peacekeeping force inside Ukraine. He told our political editor, Beth Rigby, that the UK will play our full part after any peace negotiations. The Prime Minister spoke on a visit to Ukraine, where a Russian drone was shot out of the sky over the presidential palace during his stay. We'll be live in Ukraine shortly, but first, Beth Rigby's full report and a warning it does include images of Keir meeting burns victims.
How long ago was the injury?
The Prime Minister face-to-face with the human cost of the war in Ukraine.
He was protecting our motherland.
Yeah.
Visiting Kyiv for the first time since taking office, meeting patients at the country's main burns hospital. NHS doctors have helped to train the staff here. Their work is slow, painful and vital. This is why visits like this really matter. The Prime Minister today seeing people coming in from the war zones with 80% burns. A really, really horrific reminder of the real pain and suffering of the Ukrainian people. A visit designed to give one clear message: solidarity. Shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky, laying a wreath at the wall of remembrance for Ukraine's fallen men. There is diplomatic substance along with the symbolism. The two leaders signing a landmark 100-year deal to deepen security ties and strengthen their country's relationship into the next century. The urgency underscored by a Russian drone hovering over the presidential palace while the two men spoke. Air raid sirens sounding moments before the start of the joint press conference.
For me, that drone attack is just really a reminder of what Ukraine is facing every day, and a reminder that this war is brought about by Russian aggression. It is an unjust, illegal war, and we must have a sustainable and lasting peace for Ukraine.
Anti-aircraft gunfire was audible in the palace's courtyard, the president undeterred.
Mr. President, we will say hello to them as well.
The PM announced extra air defence support for Ukraine, but on the matter of President Zelensky's long-stated desire for NATO membership, the frustration clear.
The US, Slovakia, Hungary and Germany were honest that they did not want to see us in NATO. It's an open conversation and there are no secrets about this. These are the four countries. They all have their reasons, but they have not seen Ukraine in NATO yet.
This is a visit filled with the symbolism of a leader determined to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. But when it comes to the substance, everything could be about to change as Donald Trump sweeps to power, determined to end this war at the negotiating table rather than on the battlefield. The imminent shift in Washington has focused the mind of Ukraine's allies. Would you be prepared to deploy troops for peacekeeping? This is an open discussion amongst allies. Macron's talking about it. You met him last week. Just in principle, would you agree to do that?
Well,
in principle,
I've been discussing this with a number of allies, including, of course, President Macron, including President Zelensky here today, and we will play our full part. We have always been one of the leading countries in relation to the defence of Ukraine, and so you can read into that that we will be playing our full part.
And what would you say to British people that might be listening to this views back home that think, we don't want to get dragged into this, we don't want our troops to get dragged into any peacekeeping, we don't want to get dragged into any sort of more direct conflict or engagement with Russia? What would you say?
Well, I understand that. We are, of course, fully committed to NATO, and we're already deploying troops on a number of frontiers, as you know. And we're doing that because that impacts on our safety and security. And so for me, as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the number one priority is the safety and security of everybody in the United Kingdom. But that safety and security starts on this front line here in Ukraine.
These the tools of war, but now the talk is all about how to end the conflict. As the Prime Minister signals, he's prepared to put British boots on the ground to maintain the peace deal that the changing world order now demands. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Kyiv.
And our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, joins me now from Kyiv tonight. And Deborah, how immediate a prospect is it that British troops could be deployed to Ukraine? And do we know what the military think of the idea?
It's all really hypothetical at the moment as countries like the UK try to think about how they can give Ukraine the security guarantees that it needs to be confident that Russia isn't going to use any kind of future peace deal that gives it control of some of Ukrainian territory to just rearm, re-equip and re-attack. Clearly, some kind of international force on the ground is one possibility, but it would be a huge undertaking. Just look at North and South Korea. There are still some 30,000 American troops on the ground in South Korea defending or protecting that frontier, which is a fraction of the size of the front line here in Ukraine. And that raises another question when it comes to the UK. The Prime Minister says he wants the UK to play its full part, but he is overseeing a military that has been shrunk and diminished from decades of cuts. Yes, a defence review is underway. Yes, he is pledging transformation, but he has yet even to say when he is going to increase defence spending to a level that many inside defence say is woefully short of what's actually needed to provide a credible force.
OK, Deborah, thank you.
Good evening from Doha. More than 24 hours on from the announcement of a ceasefire over Gaza, Israel's government still hasn't ratified the deal, and Gaza's civil defense agency says Israeli attacks have killed at least 70 people. America's Secretary of State Antony Blinken described the delay as a loose end. But tonight, one of the Israeli Prime Minister's hardline backers said he would resign from his cabinet if the deal is agreed. In a moment, we'll see the situation on the ground in Gaza. But first, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports from Israel.
Israel is divided over the news of a ceasefire deal. Outside the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem, hundreds gathered this morning to protest against it.
We don't want to do deals with the devil again. We had enough of that. We want to beat this war. We send our soldiers to war, to battle, to win this battle.
The fact that we're only receiving in this current deal 33 hostages over the span of 47 days, it just shows that we haven't done enough and that we still have more work to do.
They have powerful support in the Israeli government. The far-right parties have threatened to leave the coalition if the ceasefire deal is approved.
Some of the protesters here are family members of Israeli soldiers killed fighting in Gaza over the last 15.5 months, and they believe that the deal struck in Qatar amounts to an Israeli surrender.
The Israeli cabinet should have met today to approve the deal, but Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hamas of demanding last-minute changes. He's also facing a rebellion from some in his own coalition. The National Security Minister has threatened to resign.
With an abandoned agreement approved and implemented, we will deliver our letters of resignation to the Prime Minister, and the Otzma Yehudit will not be part of the government, and we are resigning from it.
The United States is confident the ceasefire will begin on Sunday.
I am confident, and I fully expect that implementation will begin, as we said, on Sunday. Look, it's not exactly surprising that in a process and a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught, you may get a loose end.
In Tel Aviv tonight, hostage families and their supporters were again on the streets, as they have been every week for 15.5 months. Yifat Calderon's cousin, Ofer, is one of the hostages. He is 52 years old and so expected to be released in the first phase.
I just get hope, but I don't have any faith in each side of not in our side and not in the other, and Hamas. We got to finish this war. We got to bring them all back. Because if we're going to wait more and more, we'll not have anybody, any hostages to bring home.
These are nervous days in Israel and Gaza. The ceasefire agreement has already proved itself to be fragile. Despite the mediators' optimism, few here think it will hold for long. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Israel.
Well, for some families in Gaza, the wait for the ceasefire to be implemented will be a time of the utmost pain. Today we heard from one man whose mother was killed waiting for her children to be able to return from the south of the territory. Another man's brother was killed, he said, while the ceasefire deal was being revealed. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
The ceasefire in Gaza cannot come fast enough. The funeral processions are still endless. There's not yet any respite from the falling bombs. This is the body of Abdul Rahman. He was killed as the ceasefire agreement was being announced.
2 people were killed in the house, and afterwards I found out that one of the martyrs was my brother.
It has taken 15 months to get to this point, but the violence will continue until the ceasefire hopefully becomes a reality on Sunday. The impact of the war here has been devastating. Whole towns and villages levelled by bombardment. And more than 45,000 people killed and rising.
We were waiting for the truce and were happy. It was the happiest night since October the 7th. Suddenly, after an hour, we received the news of the martyrdom of 40 people from the Alouche family, including my uncle.
Outside this hospital in Gaza City, they arrange the bodies of the dead as best they can. In this scene of misery, they sit quietly in a state of shock. Almost every family in Gaza has lost loved ones. Osama Al-Hajj Ali mourns the loss of his mother.
She was waiting for the ceasefire and to be happy meeting her children coming from the south. Look what they are doing to us in the last days before the ceasefire.
The flow of casualties never seems to stop, and neither does the grief. There were celebrations when the deal was announced, but now, until it becomes a reality, there is fear and uncertainty over whether this will ever end. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
So for the people of Gaza, they're waiting tonight for the ceasefire to finally be agreed and then begin. But what's left of the territory where more than 2 million of them live? Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been reviewing the scale of destruction after 15 months of war.
We are at the very earliest stages of a ceasefire. It's not the end of the war, it's not a lasting peace, but it is the best opportunity since the start of this conflict, which began with Hamas's attack on Israel on the 7th of October 2023, and which has left Gaza in total ruin. Now, here's how it may or may not work. As part of the agreement, Israel has agreed to withdraw troops, what it calls the buffer zone, along the full length of its border with Gaza, but not here on the border with Egypt. But when they do pull out, well, what the Israeli military is leaving behind is, frankly, a wasteland. After more than a year of fighting, this is the picture of the damage in red. Around 60% of all the buildings in Gaza have been damaged. And this isn't just an estimate, it's based on satellite radar data. So when buildings have been damaged or topple, that radar from above reflects back to the satellite differently. So this is the damage that is actually detectable from space. But the situation for the homes that people might hope to return to is even worse. 93% of those have been damaged or destroyed. Now, to give you some idea of the change, we can look at satellite imagery. This is northern Gaza, in an area called Beit Lahir, from October 2023. Now, over a year later, you can see this area has been completely destroyed. A green neighbourhood turned to sand and rubble. Most people from across Gaza have gathered in what Israel has termed a humanitarian zone in an area on the coast called Al-Mawasi here. Now, this image of the area from October 23 shows an expansive, sandy coastline dotted with agricultural areas. But on the 3rd of January, this satellite image taken shows the entire area covered in tents where people have been displaced and they're living in dire conditions. In total, you get 1 million people over here living in this orange zone. It's a narrow strip, 7 miles long, less than a mile wide. Getting aid to those people is crucial. Naturally, it's one of the immediate ceasefire steps. Now, this chart shows the amount of aid the Strip has received throughout the year. You can see here in blue the number of trucks that have been arriving each day. And the deal requires a sharp increase, here in green, in the amount of aid entering the Strip. It needs 600 truckloads of humanitarian aid each day, and you can see how far off that is what we've had so far throughout this conflict. All of that is still conditional. The ceasefire is not yet in place. It may not hold, different stages of it may slip. And that means the even bigger long-term questions, how Gaza will rebuild, who will rebuild it, have no answer.
Tom Cheshire reporting there. Well, as we've been hearing from our correspondents, it is an anxious and nerve-wracking wait between now and Sunday, and frankly, anything can happen. As we saw there in Gaza, the bombardment continues as they celebrated last night. Today, they're burying many more people who have been killed as a result of the aerial strikes by Israel. And then within Israel, the hostage families are desperately waiting for their loved ones to return home and that they can be reunited. But we're also seeing those divisions within Israel, and we're waiting for the Israeli government and cabinet to ratify this deal. We'll be following all the developments from the region. But for now, Gillian, back to you in the studio.
Thank you. After a fortnight of pressure on the government from victims, the opposition and Elon Musk, the Home Secretary beefed up its response to the disgust over grooming gangs today. The government will commit £10 million to fund 5 new local inquiries, as well as provide more support for the police. There'll be a 3-month rapid audit of the current scale of exploitation across the country, overseen by Baroness Louise Casey. And the government will take forward the 20 recommendations from the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse final report, with a timetable for implementation to be set out before Easter. Crucially, though, there won't be the national inquiry that many are demanding. And 2 survivors of the gangs we spoke to today told us the government was trying to shut them up. Becky Cottrell reports.
I was sexually abused in a churchyard and then went to the police station to report it. The officer told me to go home and come back when I'd sobered up.
Sam says 2 strangers in the police station offered to give her a lift.
The officer told me to go with them. From that, I was gang raped by multiple men.
She was just 12 years old. And then there's what happened to Jane. She says police saw her being raped by an older man.
The police actually placed me in handcuffs and threw me in the back of a police van and said they were arresting me for prostitution. I was 14 years old. No child can be a prostitute.
This horrific abuse happened in Oldham. The government has been under pressure for weeks to order a national inquiry into crimes that happened here and in other towns, but instead today put its weight behind more local inquiries.
As we've seen, effective local inquiries can delve into far more local detail and deliver more locally relevant answers and change than a lengthy nationwide inquiry can provide.
It seems they will not be statutory inquiries under the 2005 Act. That means these local inquiries will not have the power to compel witnesses to attend or to take evidence under oath or to requisition written evidence. So if that's the case, how can they possibly get to the truth when faced with cover-ups?
That's exactly what Sam and Jane fear. They say the government's announcement falls woefully short of what's needed.
They're trying to shut us up and act like they're doing something, when in reality they're not doing very much.
Today they met with Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips. Recently a target for Elon Musk on social media, now survivors feel betrayed by her.
The Labour Party do not care about our survivors and will do whatever they feel is appropriate for their party and not for us.
The conversation around grooming scandals has become deeply political and often toxic, but exposing the truth is all the victims want, and that still feels a long way off. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Birmingham.
The message from the family of a schoolgirl stabbed to death in a row over a teddy bear was clear. Put the knives down, said the aunt of Eliane Andam outside the Old Bailey today. She'd just seen her niece's killer convicted of murder. Here's our correspondent, Rachel Venables.
We come to collect the stuff from her son.
Smiling and laughing, this is Eliane Andam.
He didn't even bring the stuff.
Moments before she was killed. The 15-year-old had gone with a friend who was meeting her ex, Hassan Sentamu, to return each other's belongings. But the 17-year-old turned up without his ex-girlfriend's things, including a teddy bear she desperately wanted back. So Eliane snatched Hassan's bag of returned clothes and ran. But he chased her down and stabbed her 4 times in a moment of white-hot anger. The 15-year-old schoolgirl died there on the street.
Our world was shattered and our hearts were broken by the senseless and violent loss of our beloved daughter, Eliane Andam. She had her whole life ahead of her, filled with hopes and dreams for the future, all cruelly taken away from her and from us.
I'm looking for someone who's just stabbed someone. Need to see him, say something else, Scott.
Sentamu was arrested 90 minutes after the attack. The court hearing how his difficult childhood involved a catalogue of aggressive behaviour, sometimes involving knives, though his defence team argued his loss of control during the killing was down to his autism. After weeks in court, Eliane's family have this message.
We say to the young ones, put the knives down. Put the knives down. To everybody who is holding a knife and thinking of using it the wrong way, please, 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 put the knife down.
Eliane's family face a future without their bright, bubbly girl, a teenager who loved music, dancing and church, who had her life taken in a moment of laughter while trying to support a friend. Rachel Venables, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
A teenager has been sentenced to 6 years for charges including possessing a document for terror purposes. The Old Bailey heard that 19-year-old Cameron Finnegan from Horsham in West Sussex was part of an extremist group. He also encouraged young girls to self-harm online. GDP figures show the UK economy returned to growth in November after 2 months of contraction. GDP grew by 0.1% compared to the previous month. The Office for National Statistics says the construction industry, pubs, restaurants and IT companies all fared well. And tributes are being paid tonight to the film director David Lynch, who's died at the age of 78. His career was a catalogue of cult classics like the original Dune and Blue Velvet, though ironically he was perhaps best known for his television series Twin Peaks. His family said he left a big hole in the world. So-called corridor care is a year-round problem in the NHS, one nurse has told Sky News. after the union that represents more than 500,000 of them released a searing report into overcrowding in the health service. The backdrop, what the NHS said, was the busiest week yet this winter, with 96% of adult general and acute beds being used. 5,851 beds for winter viruses have been occupied on average every day. That's 170% higher in comparison to the same time last year, but down 8% from the week before. The extent of overcrowding is clear, with a report released by the Royal College of Nursing finding almost 7 in 10 nurses saying they are delivering care in overcrowded or unsuitable places, such as corridors, every day. Our health correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
I have a nightmare that I walk out into the corridor and there's dead bodies in body bags on trolleys.
Sarah dreads work and wants to leave. She often treats patients in corridors. It is, she says, undignified and unsafe.
A relative said to me, my mum was really struggling to breathe, and I went over to her and she was almost in a respiratory arrest, so her oxygen levels were so low that she almost needed resuscitating because the oxygen at the bottom of her trolley had run out.
With hospitals close to capacity, cramped corridors are filling up. This isn't makeshift medical care. It's now the norm. Speaking anonymously, 2 nurses have told Sky News of their harrowing experiences.
We don't just corridor care in the winter, it's an all-year-round problem. We've been at capacity in the hospital for so long, we just invent new spaces. I have come to the very sad conclusion this week that I don't think I can continue working in the NHS or as a nurse. It breaks my soul. I love what I do.
For patients too, the reality is dire. Rowena's 76 and spent 2 days being treated on a chair in A&E. Not once, but twice.
I think everyone's totally demoralised. I think it's survival. I think the staff are demoralised. I think I'm petrified now of having to go into A&E. I would say at the moment, healthcare as we know it or knew it doesn't exist.
NHS England says this is not the standard of care it aspires to. At Queen's Hospital in Essex, they're apologising and advising patients to lobby their MP, who here happens to be the Health Secretary.
We've got a really poor layout, it's really cramped, we've got no waiting room in the majors area, and when we see 30 or 40 patients an hour, as we do at the peak of demand, people just get put everywhere. They're in 3 or 4 different corridors waiting to be seen and treated.
Social care shortages delay patient discharges, and although flu's now peaked, demands and pressures on hospitals and staff are still high. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
You're watching Sky News at 10, and we are waiting for the latest launch of the SpaceX Starship rocket from the company's home base in Texas. As part of the mission, SpaceX is aiming to catch the booster as it comes back down to land with its so-called chopsticks on the launch tower. Elon Musk's company isn't the only one advancing in the space race today, though. This morning, his fellow billionaire, Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, launched its New Glenn rocket into orbit. Well, our correspondent Thomas Moore is with me and will be for the duration as we watch this flight test. It's the 7th flight test, isn't it, that we're seeing?
Absolutely, yes. And Elon Musk likes to advance things by breaking things. So all that failure in the past leads to further innovation. He develops these rockets extremely quickly. So although this is just the 7th test flight, we're already on the 2nd generation of the rocket. So this one is 2 meters taller. It's more than 40 stories high. It's very difficult from those pictures to get any sense of scale, but that is almost as high as a skyscraper. And it is by extending the top, they've been able to put 25% more propellant on board, so it could do longer duration flights. This is a rocket that could have multiple uses, not just for lifting stuff into space, into orbit, big objects, even like solar power stations in the future, but also it could be used to move people around the world. So imagine getting anywhere on the planet in less than an hour. And also, of course, taking people to the moon and Mars, because Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX, wants us to be a multi-planetary species.
Getting anywhere on the planet within an hour?
Yeah, that is one of the possibilities.
We've not thought about that sort of use, because you only think about the use in space, don't you?
Yeah, but you know, if you're orbiting the planet, well, you can come down out of orbit at any point. So London to Sydney in what, less than half an hour, I'd imagine.
So this is bigger and better than anything before. All the flaws that they'd ironed out and we were exposed previously, those are being tested. They've been completely eradicated.
Well, you hope. You never know until you fly. So the reason that last time the Starship wasn't able to be captured by those chopstick arms was that the sensor on the tower had actually been burnt out during the launch. Now, they've refined that to make it more resistant to the extreme heat that such a large rocket gives off. So hopefully it'll be more robust. Last time they had to bring it down in the Indian Ocean. This time we're hoping for that spectacular capture. And that's not just for show. This is key to making Starship reusable, a quick turnaround vehicle. That's the way that Elon Musk and SpaceX are trying to bring down the cost of space launches. And the figures are extraordinary. If you think back to the space shuttle in the 1980s, that could lift cargo for a cost of just over £50,000 a kilogram. Well, Starship could do it for perhaps 100.
Just want to point out the clock at the top left-hand of the screen. That's counting down. That is to the flight test, I presume. It says Starship flight test. So in under 6 minutes, we shall see, hopefully, the test begin. That's
what we're hoping. So there is a 60-minute launch window. Now, we're actually, of course, as time passes, this was supposed to be just after 10 o'clock that we launched, so we're well into that window already. And then about just under 7 minutes, you will see that rocket booster, the Super Heavy, as it's called, coming back down to the launch pad to be grabbed by those chopsticks. It's quite an extraordinary return because it comes at supersonic speed and then slows rapidly just to dangle in the air while the chopsticks go in and grab it.
Just describe a little further, for those that might not have seen it, that famous chopsticks manoeuvre.
Yeah, I mean, what happens is that once the spaceship has departed the rocket has departed the launch pad and it separates about 4 minutes into the flight. Just 2.5 minutes into the flight. The rocket booster, the bottom bit, comes back to the launch pad, and the launch tower by then has erected these two arms that point out horizontally, and they just grab this rocket so it doesn't need to land on the ground, it doesn't topple over or anything like that, because it's a huge piece of machinery, so catching it is deemed to be the best way of making sure that it's not dented or that it is preserved so it can be used again very, very quickly.
And that is a vital part of the process, isn't it? Because the whole idea is that this is a reusable spaceship, so the chopsticks manoeuvre is integral to the whole idea.
Absolutely, and this is the idea, to quickly turn around these things, these vehicles, because that's how you bring down the costs of launching. And we're good to go. And look at that weather. I mean, those are beautiful skies. We're in southern Texas, though, almost on the Mexican border, Boca Chica, where Elon Musk has his base there, SpaceX. And you can see some of the gassing off there from the rocket. It's all loaded with a mixture of liquid methane, which is natural gas, and liquid oxygen. That's how it lifts off into space.
And I was reading that there will be, there has been some warning of a sonic boom that will be emitted. So presumably people within the vicinity have been warned about that.
Yeah, I mean, this thing accelerates extremely quickly. You're reaching speed. So take it into orbit. This is actually a suborbital launch profile, so it won't quite go into orbit. It's not going quite that high, but nevertheless, it will reach a speed of several thousand miles an hour. So that sonic boom will be heard across large parts of the southern United States, for sure.
How long will the flight test actually take?
So it's just over an hour, the whole thing, before the upper stage, which confusingly is also called Starship. It's a Starship spacecraft. That will come down in the Indian Ocean. Now, in time, that too will come back safely and launch next to the land next to the launch pad. So again, the two halves of what you're seeing there will return to the launch pad. Everything is contained within one space base. It can quickly be put together, refueled and sent up again.
And we're looking now at the preparations before that actual test flight takes underway. So what are we seeing now at this moment?
So what you're seeing is an enormous rocket, 123 metres high, the most powerful rocket ever built, 2-3 times more powerful than Saturn V, which took the Apollo missions to the moon. And it is designed to lift up to 150 tons. And that's so much that you could envisage whole space stations being taken up in one go. If you imagine the International Space Station, which was built with a space shuttle, that had to be done piecemeal, little sections taken up and bolted together by astronauts. This, in theory, could do a big space station in one go. And that's going to be critical for the kind of infrastructure that we're going to be building in orbit and in lunar orbit too in the future.
We're hearing that everything is on track. All the conditions are in place for a successful test flight. Apparently, the window, 40 seconds before the actual test flight, is the time where if there was any change, they would announce it. So it's close to the wire, isn't it?
Yeah, so 30 seconds before launch, the flight director verifies that everybody is good for launch. So we're reaching a critical stage here.
OK, should we listen in? Because we're close.
But do not be shocked if that happens. It has happened in the past, and we can hang out there for a couple of minutes if we need to.
If memory serves me right,
we hold my breath for 4 seconds.
Pass through prop load gate.
All right, we passed right through that prop load gate.
Hot diggity dog.
All right, so we're going to let our flight director, Ty Huntington, take it away.
Go for launch.
And 20 seconds.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Vehicle's pitching downrange. Booster check pressure is nominal.
All right, we're more than 30 seconds into flight. Telemetry showing 33 out of 33 engines as it's pitching downrange.
Booster ship, avionics power, and telemetry nominal.
Hearing good call-outs on the ship and booster avionics. You just heard the rumble hitting us about 6 miles away. Watching Starship arc into just endless blue skies right now.
Vehicle supersonic.
More than a minute into flight, the vehicle's supersonic.
Max Q.
So we just passed through max Q. That's the greatest stress the vehicle is going to experience on the way uphill. Reminder that all of our teams down here on the ground are now looking at systems on the tower. They just did a manual check through. That's going to inform that manual flight director's decision. Next moment coming up, though, is going to be hot staging. Don't take your eyes off it. It's one heck of a light show.
What a gorgeous ascent.
6 ship engines getting ready to ignite. That's going to happen while we're still attached.
We can still see the ship's engines from the ground.
Got a little under 30 seconds away from that. We are hearing good call outs on the tower preparedness from the manual checks. Reminder though, we've still got automated checkouts on the booster and the ship itself. But as of right now, our manual checks and our manual commanding is looking go for a catch.
Booster engine cut off.
That is incredible news. We just heard the call out for booster engine cut off.
Engine startup.
Most engines cut off, down to those
Stage
middle
separation.
three.
Booster press startup.
All right, hot stage confirmed. We've got a booster hopefully on its way back to us, and a ship now making its ascent burn into space. How's it going in Hawthorne, Jesse?
It's great over here. You can hear the crowd screaming for every milestone. The booster is now making its way back down to Earth. Looks like we have 12 of those 13 engines ignited. We're using the engines that actually gimbal.
We are go for booster return.
An excellent call out there. We are go for booster return.
Avionics, power and telemetry nominal.
There's a lot of criteria that needed to line up to ensure that we could have a safe booster catch, and it sounds like we got the go for that. And there you can see on your screen, we had we just jettisoned the hot stage, and there's a great, excellent view there of the hot stage floating away from the super heavy booster. Now we've shut down the engines for that boost back burn. That confirms boost back burn is now complete. That was the first of 2 burns required for the vehicle to make its way back down to Earth. And next coming up will be the landing burn. That's going to be 13 of those center engines igniting again. And that will then go down from 13 down to 3 engines just right before we touch down for that booster catch. Now, reminder, our stage 1 objectives are to have a controlled ascent, stage separation, as well as a controlled boost back burn and hot stage as well. So we're looking good for that so far. Some great views there from the ship of Earth. That looks incredible. Now, Starship's ship is still firing its engines right now.
Starship trajectory nominal.
And great call outs. Starship trajectory is nominal. You can follow along the telemetry, the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner for the super heavy booster, as well as the bottom right-hand corner for the ship. And these views are just amazing. Again, the booster is currently making its way back to the tower today. So we're looking forward to a booster catch with the chopsticks. And in the meantime, you can see those grid fins there, helping to control the vehicle and guide it back to its landing site.
Booster FTS is saved.
Now with that, we're gonna hand it back. How's it going over there, Dan and Kate? How are you doing, Kate? Seeing that in person?
You know, Dan had to take that entire segment because I couldn't talk. That was incredible.
There it is.
We can see the booster coming back in now through the plume. At least it looks that way to us. It's incredible that it basically returns. It looks like a speeding, just like this silver flare coming back to the. Once again, we are standing by for attempting to catch the booster at the tower. This would be the second tower catch.
Booster
landing burn. Seeing 13 engines.
Booster now hovering as it aligns with the tower for catch.
Booster coming in. Get ready for that boom, Kate.
Down to 3 engines.
Booster ready for trip. Megazord has caught the booster.
You heard it here. Maxilla has caught the booster.
Once again, for the second time, a successful catch by the launch tower. This is the same tower, the launch pad, where that booster took off from just 7.5 minutes ago. Great view from the chopstick arms, looking at those hypersonic grid fins that steer the booster for that precision landing. It almost looks like it's flapping its wings.
Yeah, you can see just how small that catch fitting is, too, on something that's just so massive.
That was absolutely insane.
Meanwhile,
we're not done, but wait, there's more. Wow, that is just absolutely stunning. And this, of course,
OK, so what we have witnessed there is the second successful booster capture there, that famous chopsticks manoeuvre, completely successful, it seems, at Boca Chica in Texas. Thomas Moore still with me. It was textbook, wasn't it? Everything went according to plan.
Yeah, it's almost so incredible that it looks like a computer game. It was amazing to see a huge piece of metal coming out of the sky at supersonic speed, then slowing to a hover, but with point accuracy, precision, right next to the tower in a ball of flame. It really does look quite alarming. And then those arms just coming in and just grabbing the rocket safely. And that could in future be turned around extremely quickly. It is safe there, and it could be reused, bolted onto another Starship and launched again.
And when it came in initially on 13 engines, which was rapidly cut down to 3. But as you say, that precision and the way that it hovered, the accuracy is astounding.
And this is autonomously. The ship is doing it on its own. And while all the excitement is clearly looking at this chopsticks manoeuvre, the top half of the rocket is still going around the planet and doing all the other mission-critical stuff that they need to do just to prove that this spaceship is getting towards operational level. This is still considered an experimental vehicle, a prototype for the kind of rocket we're going to need to take people and lots of cargo into space, into orbit and beyond, to the moon and even to Mars. And Elon Musk wants a self-sustaining city on Mars within 20 years. That's an awful lot of equipment that's going to be leaving the planet.
And we've seen that famous chopsticks manoeuvre, but I mean, it's not the culmination. The mission isn't over yet, as you're saying.
That's right. So this time round, they're not only testing various other things, structural changes to the rocket itself. So they've improved the heat shield so that when it comes down, it can quickly be turned around. You don't want to be a situation, as often was the case with, for example, the space shuttle, where heat shield tiles would fall away and need to be repaired. They want to turn this round just like an aircraft is at an airport. You know, you refuel, you reload, and you go again. That's how you get the kind of economies of scale with an aircraft and also with a spaceship in future. They're also looking at dummy satellite deployment in space this time round. So there's lots of satellites that need to go into orbit. Elon Musk wants to prove that the Starship is capable of doing that. That's the way he's going to attract commercial business, people signing contracts now for future missions.
And a lot of work has gone on prior to this date. The vehicle's avionics underwent a complete redesign. There's a lot of work that has changed and been developed since the last flight test.
That's right. He innovates through failure. So everything that broke last time, he'll fix and try and do again. Now, many traditional space companies would do it incrementally. He just breaks everything and just completely rips everything up and goes for revolution, not evolution. And that's the way he designs these spacecraft so quickly. And he's got a lot of work to do, because the intention is that come mid-2027, a version of the Starship is going to be landing people on the moon. Now, that's a long way away, and to get there, you're not only going to have to get transporting Starship into orbit around the Earth, but you're also then going to have to refuel it with other starships acting as tankers. That's yet to be proven that he could do that. So a lot of milestones need to be done. There are 25 flights planned for this year alone. That's the pace of development you're now going to be looking at for this rocket.
And presuming those flights are successful, what is then the next stage? What comes next?
So there are going to be 4 different versions of the Starship family. One is a crewed version, so that was the one that will be taking not only people around the world, so transporting people to Sydney in time for lunch, but also taking astronauts to the moon and to Mars, 100 people at a time, potentially. Then you're going to have a refueling tanker Starship, you're going to have a cargo Starship, and you're going to have another one which is taking people up and down onto the lunar surface, each with slightly different design profiles, because of course if you're on the moon you don't need the heat shield, doesn't have the thick atmosphere of Earth, so you can tweak the design to fit the purpose.
At the moment, the world's largest rocket, are we going to see bigger and bigger and bigger, or where does it end?
Well, version 3 of this, which is already on the drawing board, is going to be bigger still. I mean, it is enormous what Elon Musk and SpaceX are planning. They do believe that this is going to be a multi-planetary species, and to get to Mars, you're looking at 6 months. There's an awful lot of stuff that needs to come with, and that's going to need a huge spacecraft.
In terms of the future, when might we see this other world developing, this other community developing on Mars?
Yeah, Elon Musk has talked about getting to Mars in 4 years, landing people on the surface, and then a self-sustaining city base on Mars in 20 years. I mean, that's an extraordinary, rapid and bold prediction, development, but you wouldn't bet against Elon Musk, because he really has proved the impossible to capture a spacecraft like this, to turn them around. He's already doing that with smaller rockets, and to do it with such a mega rocket like this, where you are able to launch huge loads, 150 tons at a time, it's quite remarkable.
Of course, he's not the only one in the race. Fellow billionaire Jeff Bezos, his Blue Origin launched also.
The 2 richest men on the planet now seeking their fortunes in the stars. Absolutely, going face to face in space is quite exciting, and probably good, because you wouldn't want the route to space owned by just one person. Elon Musk is a divisive character. Now, would you want our future access to space in his hands? Probably not. You'd want that healthy competition. So to have Jeff Bezos in the game too is good for humanity, probably, but also increases business competitiveness as well. So might even bring the cost of getting to space even lower.
If we get there in the first place. And what's the difference in their stages of development?
So Jeff Bezos, the New Glenn, that's the name of his rocket, that was launched for the first time today. Right. That was at its first attempt, it got to orbit, which is quite remarkable for a rocket. They usually fail several times before they reach success. Now, he too is trying to reuse parts of the rocket. That didn't work today, so there's work to be done. He was hoping to land it on a ship out in the Atlantic, and it didn't make it. Work to do, but that is the way you bring down that cost, as we keep saying, if you can reuse these parts.
It seems that the only thing stopping Elon Musk, perhaps the authorities, in terms of the number of test flights that can go forth, is there any resistance to this frenetic pace of development?
Not within the space industry, because he's opening up new opportunities. You know that old saying with a gold rush, that you don't make your money by looking for gold, you make your money from selling spades. That's effectively what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are doing. If you control the route to space, that's how you guarantee a really lucrative future. There are so many launches planned over the years and decades to come, as we do seek this, well, it's a new era of exploration of the moon and Mars, and who knows, maybe even beyond.
Indeed. Thomas, we're just hearing via the Reuters newswire that SpaceX has lost contact with Starship's second stage. That happened minutes after the liftoff from Texas. How significant is that?
Well, that will be a disappointment, for sure. They would have been hoping to bring it down in the Indian Ocean. They would have been gathering an awful lot of data along the way. But, you know, Elon Musk has got so many cameras, so many lines of data being streamed back from that rocket. They can stream 120 megabits per second. That's faster than my Wi-Fi at home by several times. And that's why we're getting such excellent picture. Now, there's a picture that SpaceX can see that we're not. And they will be going through, if they have lost it, then they will be going through to work out exactly why, changing the design and making it more reliable next time. Yeah, so that next test flight will benefit from this learning curve, this very, very steep learning curve that they're on. 100%. They always say getting to space isn't easy, but SpaceX is about the best in the business.
And certainly that chopsticks manoeuvre, I don't know if we can see it again. If we can see it again, it was textbook and absolutely precise. There it is, from the 13 engines down to the 3 engines. It almost doesn't seem real, but perfect chopsticks manoeuvre there, the booster landing. Much more coming up at the top of the hour.